Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 274, and in the main event, we have Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje for the lightweight title, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for this amazing main event. I've already done prediction videos for the co-main event, Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza 2, as well as the featured fight on the card, Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson. I will link those down in the description if you guys want to go check those prediction videos out after this. So this is a fight that I am so excited for. This is such a compelling matchup, and there is no way that this fight ends up being a boring fight. When's the last time you've seen Charles Oliveira in a boring fight? Literally never. When's the last time you've seen Justin Gaethje in a boring fight? Literally never. This is two guys who thrive in chaos. Both of those guys are always in crazy back and forth fights, and I am so excited for this fight because you have two guys who are elite world-class lightweight fighters. Both of them are in their prime, and skill for skill, this is such an intriguing matchup because you have a little bit of that grappler versus striker matchup, but Charles Oliveira is much more than just a grappler. And then on top of that, you have the lightweight title on the line. I am so pumped for this UFC 274 main event. So if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, Oliveira is 32 years old, Gaethje is 33. Oliveira is 5'10", Gaethje is 5'11". Oliveira has a 74-inch reach, Gaethje has a 70-inch reach. So a 4-inch reach advantage for Oliveira, everything else pretty much the same. You look at Justin Gaethje, he has 3 losses in his MMA career. He's only on a 1-fight winning streak coming into this title fight. He beat Michael Chandler back at UFC 268 in an amazing fight, an incredible fight. I thought Justin Gaethje won the second and third round. He could have even had a case to potentially win that first round as well. Crazy fight, especially the first 2 rounds. Justin Gaethje drops Chandler in the second round, almost finishes him. I think he could have finished him, but I think the second round is where Michael Chandler got in on a single leg and they kind of chilled in that north-south position for a long time. Before that, Gaethje had sat out for a long while. Up until UFC 268, Gaethje had not fought since October of 2020 when he lost to Khabib Nurmagomedov. He got submitted via triangle choke in the second round. And this fight, even though, a lot of people look back at that fight and say, oh, Khabib was so dominant, Gaethje had his moments in this fight. He was chopping the leg of Khabib Nurmagomedov, but I just think the game plan in this fight was off for Justin Gaethje. He was scared for his life in this fight. He was so desperate to stuff the potential takedown attempts from Khabib Nurmagomedov. He wasn't able to fight the way he usually fights. Before that is when he stepped in on short notice to take on Tony Ferguson at UFC 249. Not very many people would step in on short notice to fight Tony Ferguson, especially when he's on that long 12-fight win streak. And Justin Gaethje was willing to do it. And not only did he step in there on short notice against Tony Ferguson, he dominated him. Just beat Tony Ferguson. A lot of people think that was the career-altering beating that sent Tony Ferguson off a cliff. And, Justin Gaethje really put it on Tony Ferguson, landed a lot of hard shots, just outstruck him for the majority of the fight. The only moment Ferguson really had in that fight was that massive uppercut at the end of the first round where he hurt Gaethje. And this is the time that Justin Gaethje wins the interim lightweight title, then obviously goes on to lose it to Khabib Nurmagomedov, which we already talked about. But one more thing I want to talk about before I move on to Charles Oliveira. Before that, Justin Gaethje was on a 3-fight winning streak, a 3-fight KO streak. He brutally TKO'd Donald Cerrone. He brutally KO'd Edson Barboza, which I still think is a quality win. I know people pretend like Edson Barboza was never that good. I believe Edson Barboza was one of the elite in the lightweight division. Before that, he KO'd James Vick. I don't know how much to really put into that win. James Vick was never really good. James Vick talked so much shit in the lead up to that Justin Gaethje fight, calling him Homer Simpson, only to get brutally KO'd in the first round. And before that were his first 2 losses in his MMA career. One to Dustin Poirier in a fight that Justin Gaethje was having his moments in. He just got a little bit too reckless, started to get a little tired. Dustin Poirier, once he clips you, he just swarms you and looks for the finish. And then the fight before that against Eddie Alvarez, where he got KO'd. I think it was a knee stoppage. He hit him with a knee, hurt Justin Gaethje badly and finished him. But Justin Gaethje, you can see a clear difference in the fights after those 2 losses. Justin Gaethje comes in more methodical. He's always been a crazy wild fighter, and he still is a crazy wild fighter, but you can see he makes a concerted effort to be a little bit more technical and not be as reckless since those two losses. And I'll never forget when Justin Gaethje, I watched Justin Gaethje in World Series of Fighting for a long time. Seems like he was fighting Luis Palomino every other Saturday or every other Friday, whatever it was for World Series of Fighting. And they were crazy back and forth wars. And I'll never forget when he came into the UFC, he said, I want to see somebody try to KO me. I want to be KO'd. I'm going to go out there and fight like I always have. And it's just the mindset of Justin Gaethje. He's going out there to be killed, kill or be killed. And it's just insanity. And also, I have to mention his UFC debut against Michael Johnson was absolutely insane. Back and forth fight. Gaethje was hurt in this fight, comes back to stop Michael Johnson in the second round. An incredible fight, an incredible career for Justin Gaethje. If you haven't seen some of these fights, you need to go back and watch Justin Gaethje versus Luis Palomino, the Eddie Alvarez fight, the Dustin Poirier fight. The Tony Ferguson fight really wasn't that crazy, but the beating that he put on Tony Ferguson was unbelievable, and especially considering Tony Ferguson was a madman at this point in time. Nobody really wanted to fight Tony Ferguson. He just was destroying people. People at the end of their fights with Tony Ferguson just looked absolutely destroyed. Looked like Rob Font from this past weekend. Justin Gaethje with an incredible UFC career, even though he's only been in the UFC since 2017. He's not a guy that's been around here forever. He was in World Series of Fighting for the longest time. You move over to Charles Oliveira. And also one other thing I want to talk about Justin Gaethje before I move to Charles Oliveira. Justin Gaethje has 23 wins. 19 of those are by knockout. That is insanity. So only 4 of his wins have ever gone to anything other than a TKO or KO. He's got 1 submission. He's not known as a submission artist, and he has 3 decision wins. So if you look at Charles Oliveira, I'll start with that. He has 32 wins, 9 by knockout, 20 by submission, 3 by decision, which is just absolute insanity. And even though Charles Oliveira isn't that old, he's been in the UFC forever. He's been in the UFC longer than I've been a fan. I became a fan, I think, in late 2010. He's been in the UFC since about fall, summer of 2010, which is just insanity. And a lot of people looked at those early fights and those losses, and, he has losses to Donald Cerrone. He was KO'd by Cub Swanson, lost to Frankie Edgar, lost to Max Holloway via TKO, but it was an injury, so I don't know how much that really means. Lost to Anthony Pettis by submission, lost to Ricardo Lamas by submission. And they look at those early fights, and a lot of people questioned his heart, saying when he met adversity, he quit. Even Michael Chandler was talking about it before he fought. But I saw a Charles Oliveira, and I've always been high on Charles Oliveira because I saw a Charles Oliveira, especially over these past few years, that is just ever improving, and he's on a crazy win streak right now. His best wins, one over Kevin Lee, submission via guillotine in a very competitive fight. Kevin Lee, I know Kevin Lee, a lot of people like to talk crap about Kevin Lee. Sometimes Kevin Lee comes out and looks like a world beater. Other times he comes out and looks terrible and can't even, finish Diego Sanchez. But it was still a solid win by Charles Oliveira. Then he went out there and dominated Tony Ferguson, almost got the armbar. He would have armbarred anyone else. Then the TKO over Michael Chandler after he defeated Tony Ferguson was when Khabib Nurmagomedov vacated his belt, and we got Michael Chandler versus Charles Oliveira at UFC 262 of May of last year. And this was one of my favorite 2-round fights of all time. I think it's one of the best 2-round fights of all time, even though it's really only a round and like another minute. Michael Chandler went out there and almost stopped Charles Oliveira in the first round. Hurt him badly. Charles Oliveira barely survives, comes out in the second round, clips Michael Chandler, just chases him down and finishes him brutally up against the fence with nasty left hands and wins the lightweight title, which is just insane. And then after that, he fights Dustin Poirier, who's coming off those 2 wins over Conor McGregor, and he was an underdog against Dustin Poirier. And I've picked Charles Oliveira, I think, in all of his last 4 fights. I don't remember back before then, getting all the way back to 2019, 2018. I picked him against Tony Ferguson, I picked him against Michael Chandler, and I picked him against Dustin Poirier. And he was an underdog in that Dustin Poirier fight. And I understand why people thought he was going to lose, but I just know Charles Oliveira's skill set, and I knew that he would beat Dustin Poirier. I think I even predicted him by submission. The video's on the channel if you want to go check it out. But that Dustin Poirier fight was incredible. It was some of the worst commentary I've ever seen, but it was an incredible fight. Dustin Poirier won that first round. It was an incredible back and forth first round, but Dustin Poirier hurt him in the first round. Charles Oliveira even went down. Dustin Poirier kind of went down to finish him, but then backed out because he was worried about the jiu-jitsu submission game of Charles Oliveira. Then Oliveira comes out in the second round with a completely different approach, looks for the clinch, looks for the takedown, gets on top of Dustin Poirier, and Dustin Poirier was literally scared for his life on the ground. He literally put a body triangle on Charles Oliveira from the bottom just so Charles Oliveira couldn't advance his position and potentially look for submissions. And that's where I talk about the commentary. Rogan was speculating about a potential Dustin Poirier injury the whole time. Dustin Poirier was just hanging on for dear life, which wasn't true. Dean Thomas even came in and said, I think he's worried about the jiu-jitsu and submission threat of Charles Oliveira. Then in the third round, Charles Oliveira, and this is what's so crazy about Charles Oliveira and his submission game. He doesn't even have to get you down to submit you. He ducks under a right hook of Dustin Poirier, snatches his back, and within 30 seconds, 45 seconds, sinks in the rear naked choke and chokes Dustin Poirier and gets him to tap. And an incredible win. And the fight was very eventful. After that first round, I think a lot of people were thinking, okay, Dustin Poirier has this. He was really tagging Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira was landing his own shots, but still, it was looking very good for Dustin Poirier, only to drastically change in the second or third round. And that's been the theme of the last two fights for Charles Oliveira. So when I look at this fight, I look at Charles Oliveira and Justin Gaethje, and I always look at paths to victory. And I think both guys have several paths to victory. I think Justin Gaethje has 5-round cardio. He can win a Tony Ferguson type fight where he outstrikes Charles Oliveira. I think Justin Gaethje can TKO or KO Charles Oliveira. I think Oliveira can win a decision. I think Oliveira can TKO or KO Justin Gaethje. And I think Oliveira can obviously submit Justin Gaethje. So there's a lot of paths to victory for both guys in this fight. And that's what makes this fight so compelling. Because, sometimes you say, okay, well, this guy has to win by knockout, otherwise he's going to lose. It makes the fight a little less interesting because if they don't get that knockout in the first, second round, then it's like, okay, they definitely lost. This fight, each guy can win so many different ways. It is just so compelling, and there's no way that this fight sucks. Both guys want to move forward, throw heavy shots, and look for the finish. And I think no matter how this fight plays out, it's going to be one of the best fights of the year, barring a quick finish where we really don't get to see the fight play out too much. And, I look at their skill sets. Justin Gaethje has to keep this fight standing. And this isn't necessarily a grappler versus striker matchup, but if Justin Gaethje, let me just say this before I even get into my official prediction. If Justin Gaethje gets taken down by Charles Oliveira, it is over. Justin Gaethje is not going to have an answer for Charles Oliveira's jiu-jitsu and submission threat. It's not going to happen. If Oliveira gets him down, it's over. Charles Oliveira is going to win by submission. But there is that early threat from Justin Gaethje, and really it's not even an early threat. It consists throughout the fight. Justin Gaethje has good cardio. There's that threat. Oliveira has shown in the past that he is very hittable. And I think Justin Gaethje has some of the best power outside of Chandler in the first round, probably. He has some of the power that he can stop Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira has been finished before. And I think with all the damage that Charles Oliveira has taken in the past, it's, just a matter of time. Eventually, time gets everyone. And eventually someone's going to find that chin of Charles Oliveira. Instead of him weathering that storm, he's going to get finished. But I do not believe that's what's going to happen in this fight. I am going to go Charles Oliveira via second round submission. I just believe that Charles Oliveira is just too good for Justin Gaethje. And maybe Charles Oliveira has to weather the early storm, but Charles Oliveira is just so technical. He's going to be throwing deep kicks to the body. He's going to be winging hooks. He's got a nice 1-2 straight punches. Charles Oliveira mixes in all the different attacks. And I think what's going to end up happening, it's going to be similar to some of the Charles Oliveira's past fights. I think he's going to get clipped up a little bit early in the first round. I think Oliveira is also going to land his fair share of shots on Justin Gaethje. But I think eventually, as the fight goes, whether it's a scramble from a clinch position where Oliveira is looking for a takedown, or, he hurts Justin Gaethje and Justin Gaethje, goes down, Charles Oliveira is going to jump on top of him and immediately lock up a submission, transition to the back. He might duck under a punch of Justin Gaethje. That's the other thing. Charles Oliveira doesn't even need to take you down to submit you. He can duck under a shot of Justin Gaethje and then end up on the back. The way he transitioned onto Dustin Poirier's back was incredible. And can Justin Gaethje potentially stop him in the first round? Yes. but I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, Charles Oliveira is so versatile, and he's ever improving. I talked about it for a long time. Every single fight out, Charles Oliveira is improved. Every single time. He just looks better and better with every single fight. His submission game is unmatched in the UFC right now. Some of the best submissions. So slick with his jiu-jitsu. And if he ducks under a punch of Justin Gaethje, I think he could easily snatch up the back similar way to what he did to Dustin Poirier and eventually get a rear naked choke. But if I had to be more specific on exactly what I think is going to happen, I am going to say Charles Oliveira is going to hurt Justin Gaethje with a big shot, maybe a left hook in the second round. I think Justin Gaethje is going to be wobbled. I think Charles Oliveira is going to look for the clinch, eventually get to the back, drag Justin Gaethje to the ground from that position, and eventually just lock the hooks in and sink in a rear naked choke on Justin Gaethje. Second round rear naked choke for Charles Oliveira. And Charles Oliveira just has so many advantages in this fight, because even if Justin Gaethje is able to hurt him early, Charles Oliveira has a unique advantage where his jiu-jitsu game and his submission threat is so good that if he gets clipped and he's even remotely hurt, he can just fall to his back. And Justin Gaethje's not going to dive in there. He's not going to dive in there and look for the finish. And if he does, he can get submitted. I could see that happening as well. I could see Justin Gaethje rocking Charles Oliveira early. Maybe Justin Gaethje decides to dive in and look for the finish, and eventually, he gets triangle choked immediately by Charles Oliveira. We've seen him do it so many times. Kevin Lee shot in on a takedown, gets guillotined immediately. Charles Oliveira will snatch up your neck before you even realize what's happening. And Charles Oliveira there's no real weaknesses outside of his striking defense. He gets hit way too much, but he has a high guard. He has a good guard. He has the chin tucked. He has some durability. He's able to absorb big shots. He absorbed big shots from Chandler. He absorbed big shots from Dustin Poirier. And I think he'll be able to do the same from Justin Gaethje in the first round. I think he'll be able to weather the early storm. And also there's that dynamic where Justin Gaethje is going to be scared for his life. He does not want to engage in any grappling with Charles Oliveira. And there's a different way you strike when you're worried about the takedown or the clinch game and the jiu-jitsu threat of your opponent. Justin Gaethje is not going to be able to fight the way he's going to want to fight against Charles Oliveira, because he's going to be worried about that takedown threat. Because if he gets double-legged, which Charles Oliveira has great double-leg takedowns, he'll be swinging, brawling with you, all of a sudden duck down, shoot for a double-leg takedown and get it. And if he ends up getting that takedown, it is over for Justin Gaethje. I would be absolutely shocked if Charles Oliveira gets one takedown and Justin Gaethje survives, unless it's right at the end of the round. I do not see Justin Gaethje surviving this fight if he gets taken down. But there's always that interesting dynamic where if Gaethje can hurt him early and get him out of there, because Charles Oliveira just shown so many times he's very hittable. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Justin Gaethje is going to come out. He's going to look to, move constantly, circle, similar to what he did in the Khabib Nurmagomedov fight. He's going to look to chop the legs of Charles Oliveira, and he's going to look to land nasty hooks and bombs and get Charles Oliveira out of there. I think Charles Oliveira is going to press forward. I think he's going to, another thing Charles Oliveira does very, very well, when he gets into a brawl with a guy and he gets in close range, he has great knees in the clinch. I mean, Charles Oliveira has some of the best clinch strikes I've seen. He'll throw elbows over the top. He was doing it in the Dustin Poirier fight. He has nasty knees to the body. He throws, just constant attacks in the clinch, where you see some guys clinch up. They're constantly looking for underhooks, looking to trip you and take you down. Oliveira is constantly attacking no matter what position he's in. And even if he gets Gaethje down, let's say Gaethje tries the body lock in the full guard to avoid Charles Oliveira advancing position, Charles Oliveira has nasty ground and pound. And I think he will brutalize Justin Gaethje. Eventually, Justin Gaethje will have to open up, and Charles Oliveira will find a way to get that submission. I think this is a super compelling fight. And again, I think that Justin Gaethje has to get him out of there. He has to be able to stuff the takedowns, which Justin Gaethje has good takedown defense. But when you're constantly worried about it, it leaves you susceptible to the striking as well. And I think that's eventually what's going to happen. He's going to get clipped up, maybe with a left hook, hurt, and then eventually in a scramble after a takedown attempt from Charles Oliveira or some type of clinch, you know, where Charles Oliveira is looking for a trip. Eventually, Charles Oliveira is going to find his way onto Justin Gaethje's back and choke him out, rear naked choke in the second round. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I am super pumped for this fight. I mean, this fight, no matter what, should be amazing. I'm really looking forward to UFC 274. Make sure you join me live for my post-fight immediately following the fights on Saturday. Thank you so much for watching this prediction video, and I will see you in the next video.